Hey, what's up? It's Autumn, and this is Just a Thought. Hey, what's up? And welcome back. I know it's been a little bit of a break. It was spring break. The kids was out. I had to take a minute, but we back. We back, and I'm excited about the way that we are back because the conversation that we are getting ready to have is one that I actually personally am super excited and interested to have because I think that we have all walked in this space, whether personally or with someone that we know or love, where there's someone that is battling mental illness or addiction, things along that line, and it can be a really tough spot. And so navigating that is something that is a challenge. And today, my guest, which I'm going to introduce him, my guest is the perfect person to be able to help answer some questions in this space. And so, like I said, I personally am just really looking forward to it myself because I know that I am very curious about certain things pertaining to this. Okay, so first of all, let me shout out my dude because he followed directions and sent me his bio. Now, y'all know we done got a running joke about this that every single guest, I've either had to track them down or I've had to make the bio myself. But my dude, Carlos, he came through. He came through and he understood the assignment and he did what I asked him to do. So, shout outs. So, here we go. Carlos is a nationally recognized leader in behavioral health with over 20 years of experience supporting individuals impacted by mental illness and addiction. As the behavioral health strategy manager for Totally Linking Care in Maryland, Carlos leads crisis system expansion in Prince George's County and has played a key role in shaping state and national policy. What I tell you. He get ready to give us all the things. Okay, including Maryland's 988 legislation. He's known for bridging clinical excellence with strategic innovation, blending lived experience, policy insight, and a deep commitment to recovery-focused care. Whether he's leading programs, shaping national guidelines, or amplifying underrepresented voices in behavioral health, Carlos shows up with purpose, clarity, and heart. This is my dude. Carlos, what's up, sir? How are you?
I'm blessed. I'm blessed.
Okay, I
Yeah.
love to hear it. Thank you for being on today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
I feel like I haven't seen you in a minute. Well, actually, has it been within the last month? I'm trying to think of when I saw
Saw you
you.
at the barn not too long ago, but before that, it had been a while. Yeah.
It had been a while because you was missing in action. We ain't gonna talk about that today. We'll keep that for offline. But I'm hoping you back in the fold. You back in the fold?
Absolutely. I'm not going anywhere. Yeah.
We're gonna make sure we get on each other's calendar so we're not meeting just like this or haphazardly.
hmm
That
Yeah,
didn't
for sure.
sound enthusiastic, Carlos. I need you to act like you do want to see me.
Nah, absolutely, Autumn. You know, I'm always around. You know my number. We can connect.
I got you. I got you.
hmm
Um, so I think first of all, where I would really love to start is just if you could give me some insight as to because you talked about like lived experience. That was a part of your bio. Why this is so important to you personally.
Yeah, so I come from humble beginnings, like so many of us, and I've always been very appreciative. A lot of people played a major part, major role in my life, and contributing and supporting me, to where I am today. And
Mm-hmm.
during that time, I was very mindful, even as a kid, of what it was like for someone to actually do something for me. Rather it
Mm,
was give me a ride to basketball practice, give me a meal, give me a few dollars, give me some knowledge. And
right.
I always thought to myself, like, wow, how cool it is, and how I would love to be able to do that when I become an adult, and be able to give back and help people improve their life.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. So you chose really an extremely complicated area to go into to be able to give back. Necessary, 100%. And I think it takes, like when they say that's not my ministry, like this is your ministry, and it really does require grace and patience and understanding and empathy and all of the things to be able to work into in this space, because I think
Right.
it's mental illness is something that people just really truly do not understand. And so what has this meant, personally to you to be able to walk this out with people who are experiencing problems in this area of their life?
Yeah, it's meant so much to me, and I'm truly, you asked me when we first started how I'm feeling, and what's going on. I'm blessed.
Yeah,
I'm really thankful, and I give all honor to our Most High, who a lot of times who I pray to be that vessel, and a lot of
yeah,
times I allow Him to work through me. So I don't take credit for what I'm doing. I feel like it's my responsibility and my obligation to give Him back.
yeah,
So I really feel awesome about it because, I get an opportunity to do it from a high level.
yeah,
And at the same time, I still work on the ground level with boots on the ground. So,
yeah,
whether it's creating systems of care and, advocating for different resources and, laws and funding, or if I'm, talking to somebody directly, a lot of my friends and family, and friends of families, contact me when they're experiencing anything related to mental health or substance use, and I welcome that
yeah,
because my job is my passion. I really love what I do, and I feel like I am able to really kind of help individuals when they're in need. So, dealing directly with people or building systems, it's all great for me.
yeah.
I'm just happy to be able to make that impact, and I'm blessed to be able to do it.
So there's you brought up two things that I wanna. I'm like, oh, where do I want to go first? Where do I want to go first? So I'm gonna put a pin in the piece about uh, spirituality. This is obviously a Christian podcast, so God is very much in the mix, and I love that you brought that up because I think that that's hugely important. Of how much does a person's spirituality play in their mental wellness? Um, but I first want to uh, ask you about mental illness, like sort of on a spectrum. So if I'm trying to understand what that means, I think a lot of people veer more towards those sort of extreme cases, right? Somebody's got schizophrenia, somebody's got bipolar, somebody's got, you know what I mean? Like those sort of extreme things. But correct me if I'm wrong, mental illness can show up in far more
Mhm.
mild or everyday, you know what I mean, by the, I guess, clinical definition. So, I mean, if you were just going to give some insight to what that truly looks like.
Yeah, for sure, Autumn. And for me, another thing that I advocate for is I really think that mental wellness should be a common thing that we're taking care of, right?
Right,
So, you think about your physical health and how
right.
people go to the doctor, they do your annual visits, to do your physical checkups. There
Hmm.
should be an annual mental health checkup, right? You should
Agreed.
check your brain out, check to see what's going on with you emotionally, behaviorally, right? And when you think about mental health, sound like what you were leaning into is a lot of times people will try to get services when they're in crisis.
Right,
Which
right,
is my specialty, crisis services. But at the same time, the day to day, regular, just keeping yourself, good, keeping
right,
yourself sharp, the daily maintenance, right? Like,
right,
what are you doing for self care? People get lost in work, lost in family things, and get absorbed with different challenges that they have in their life. How are you managing that?
right.
uh, Anxiety, depression, all of these things are very important to make sure that you're monitoring and keeping in check on a daily basis to keep yourself well.
Right, right. That's so good. I believe in therapy, period, point blank. Like I don't care whether you feel like you're going through something or not. To your point, it's just nice to be able to talk to somebody with no judgment, with no bias. They just letting you say all the things and giving you some tools on how you can kind of work through it. And like, how is that not a good and necessary thing? You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So I think we're starting to move into a place where people are being more open and accepting of the idea of therapy and self care and talking things out. But for a very long time, and certainly in some communities and demographics and occupations and things like that, it's still very much frowned on, this idea of like, I got to be strong. And
Hmm.
strong is feeling kind of toxic. Like it's not,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know? And so what your thoughts are on that, and just, kind of giving people advice on what they're calling strong, is that really strength, or is that maybe a little bit unhealthy?
I do believe some people are doing a really good job managing it, but they're doing the
Okay.
work, right?
Right.
But in a lot of cases, people are just powering through, right? And
Right.
and in our communities, we know that to be true. Oh, you can't, be in your feelings.
Right.
You can't show any weakness.
Right.
And all of that, I think, is kind of outdated. All right,
Yeah.
I think at this point, we all know and are intelligent, educated enough to know that it's really important at times is to be vulnerable,
Right.
and letting it go and releasing. And like you said, it's very important to make sure that you have somebody to talk to, someone to help you recalibrate.
Yeah.
Because if not, you can be setting yourself up for a major crash. So, that being strong, there's a balance, and it's a
Yeah.
slippery slope, because, a lot of times when people really try to be super resilient and strong, they're just packing it all in,
Yeah.
which can kind of end up being like a volcano and lead to an eruption.
Right.
So making sure that you are maintaining that balance is crucial.
Yeah. Yeah. No, very much agreed. I spent, when you and I first met, I was in a very different space. So 18 years in public safety, and you see a lot of things in that occupation, in that space. But there is a culture of shake it off and keep it pushing.
Hmm.
And so there's a lot of, and I think that this speaks to the addiction piece, right? And I would love to hear your thoughts on this, that you find that in public safety spaces, police, fire, EMS, that kind of thing, even I want to say even like nursing and things like that, but there's like really high levels of alcoholism, infidelity, just very bad like coping mechanisms, which I think that people don't really necessarily see as addiction, right? When they think addiction, they think drugs, like illicit drugs. But that, again, spectrum, there's more to addiction than just that. And while people are sort of judging people who are using illicit drugs to deal and to cope, they too are battling with forms of addiction that they don't even realize. So, like, I mean, if you want to talk a little bit about what that looks like.
Hmm. Yeah, and you hit it right on the head, right? Our public safety, our first responders,
Mm,
and just people working, you know, 40, 60, 80 hours a week. A lot of times, with this economy, people are working two jobs.
right.
And then you have some people, right? It's two sides to it. You have, the individuals who are kind of in misery, in a depressed state, so they're self-medicating, with
Mm,
alcohol or drugs or gambling or sex or any
yeah.
type of
Yeah.
things that they are using to help, like you say, cope and manage with their situation. Then you have the individuals who are living life to the fullest. I'm partying, and
Right.
and at times we all know by now that's a cover up too, right?
Right.
It's
Right.
living the luxurious life and vacation and drinking and partying. But at what point does it become too much? So
Yeah.
if you're
Right.
going to happy hour 3, 4 times out the week, if you're drinking at weddings and you are indulging substances, when you're sad at funerals or
Yeah.
celebrations or watching the game, or those, that it adds up. At
Yeah.
what point are you not just someone that's just occasionally dabbling and having a drink here and there, or to where you actually cross over to now you're addicted and you're an addict, you're an alcoholic or you're a drug addict.
Right.
So and we talk about the prescription medications too. That's a huge topic of something that's also being abused.
Mm,
So very mindful of at what point is having the fun too much. And
right.
I think that's something that we all need to pay attention to, and be able to manage.
Yeah, well, and it sounds really honestly like self-reflection, and which is a difficult thing, but also why you need therapy, because your therapist can help you be able to understand where too much is too much, where you've crossed over, the line. I'm be honest and vulnerable here for a second myself. So I come from a traumatic childhood, and there were things that I didn't process for a really long time, and I it was just normal to me. So I didn't realize that it was even an issue or that it was showing up. But my addiction was shopping.
Mm.
And I did not realize, like, until, and then when I say addiction, I mean legit, like going into debt shopping. Like, I don't even know. At one point, my count of shoes was upwards of like over 300 pairs of shoes. Don't judge me. Don't judge me. But I'm saying like, in the clear, like I said, I've gone through therapy and just different things like that. But not realizing what it was, that it was really like this rush that something's coming in the mail and I got something new, and you know what I mean? It made me feel better. And it would only last for a minute, and then I have to buy something else to make me feel better again. And then so I noticed that the only time that I was really like shopping like that is when I didn't feel good, when I didn't feel, the best version of myself, which is clearly not healthy or appropriate,
Mhm,
and
mhm,
for so many reasons. But so I say that to say that I think that a lot of us are battling with addictions in ways that we're not calling an addiction, you
mhm,
know.
mhm.
So self-reflection and things like that are really hugely important in that regard. So
Absolutely.
um, yeah. So you said something, just to circle back for a second. You talked about spirituality. And before we got started, I kind of told you that one of the things for me is that, like, as far as my journey was not just me going to therapy, but also me going back to church and me reconnecting with God and me figuring out what my purpose was and just all those different things. But that's not everybody's journey. And some people are very strictly like, boom, God gonna fix everything. Like they're like, I don't believe in therapy, but I believe in Jesus. And some people are like, I don't believe in Jesus, but I believe in therapy.
Mhm.
What do you think? What do you think is like net? Like, how can that look? Should that look like?
Um, great question. You know, it's a story, and I don't want to misquote it or misspeak on it, but
Okay.
in so a lot of us have heard it. It's a common story, but it talks about how it was a guy on a boat, and he was, his boat was sinking or something like that in regards to him being in a crisis in the boat, right?
Uh huh.
And somebody's listening to this right now and they know the story and they're like, this is how it goes, and
Yeah.
kudos to you. But what I got from it was that this guy was on a boat, he was in crisis, and he was praying to God to save him, while he was
Mm.
out at bay at sea,
Mm.
right? And during that time, a boat came by and asked him if he needed some help. Two or three boats cruised by. And he was like,
Right.
"Hey, you look like you in trouble. Why don't you need a ride?" And he's like, "Nope,
Right.
good. I'm waiting on God. I prayed. I believe." Right. So he ended up dying. Right. On
This is a terrible story, Carlos.
yeah, he ended up dying. Right. And he went to heaven.
Hmm.
When he was in heaven, he was just like, God, what happened? I was out there praying. I was believing. I was asking for help. You didn't. You left
And you
me
never
out here.
showed up.
And God said, "Well, I sent you three boats. You turned them down, right?" So,
That
so
was you, sir.
a lot of times He's given us what we need. We have
Yeah.
to welcome, what He's also offering us, as well.
Yeah.
And
That's good.
therapy, family reaching out. You know,
Hmm.
read the signs.
Right.
And that's a part of being in touch with yourself too. Really knowing who you are and being connected to the universe,
Yeah.
will really help you be able to be more susceptible to these things. But yeah, you have to, therapy. The Most High is here for us. He's blessing us, but He also wants us to do the work too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you hit the nail on the head when you said that you want to be a vessel. And that's literally it,
Hmm.
that there are people that
Hmm.
God has placed on this planet to be a
Hmm.
vessel to help us get through, manage, get perspective, unpack all the different, they advocate for us in
Hmm.
order to deal with these things. And so it's not just prayer. And I think that that's really good, especially for all my Christians who just are like, I believe in Jesus and nothing else. Like, man, Jesus is working through people to the point of your story to help you get the help that you need. If you're looking for this miraculous like beaming light to come down from the ceiling and suddenly make you better, that's not how it works. There is work involved. Like there is going to be work involved. And sometimes there's medication that's involved.
Hmm.
And that's real too. That doesn't make you weak or failure or like less faithful or any of those things to be holistic.
Right, right.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, you think about people who, may have, like me, I got high blood pressure. I
Hmm.
gotta take high blood pressure medicine, right?
Right.
I'm gonna take it or I'm gonna suffer, right?
Right,
Or put
right.
myself in a position where something could happen to me in a chronic way. So same thing. Like I'm trying to really get rid of that distinction between mental health and physical health because it's one of the same.
Yeah, yeah. True story. So I'm gonna tell you a story, and then that's gonna, I think, lead it to the next question. So I had a family member who struggled with bipolar and um, you know, a level of schizophrenia. I don't know what like her full diagnosis was and all the things. And so she would have days that she was good, and she had a daughter. She had things that days that were good. She was fine. Everything was amazing. She was a fantastic mother. And then she had days that were like, what is going on here? I mean, like her reality was just so far removed from what we could understand or connect to or even reason with. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Um, and which caused us to then, because it altered how she could parent. And so, her daughter had to be removed and all those different kinds of things. And so trying to balance how to engage with her, um, like being empathetic and supportive and all those things, but also holding her accountable, not allowing her to just kind of be like, take me like this is it, and I'm just gonna do, you know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Mhm.
Um, but understanding that she is really battling. Like I try to put myself in her shoes and I said, everything that I look around and I see that I think is like real and makes sense. Now imagine somebody walked into the room and told me that everything that I was experiencing, seeing, all that was not real, not happening. Like that's mind boggling.
Mhm.
Like I could not imagine that reality. But that's what some people are really truly experiencing. I just think that there's a lot of family that's having that kind of balancing act. And I don't know that we did it perfect. I'm sure we didn't do it perfect. But what that can look like.
Yeah. So that can be really challenging, right?
Right.
Because it's you talked about the resilience piece earlier,
Um,
and it's so unfortunate for those who are experiencing those different types of symptoms and conditions because what happens so commonly is folks will take their meds, they'll meet with a outpatient provider, and they'll get on the ball, right, and they'll
right.
have a month, sometimes a year, 2 years, and they'll be great. And
Hmm.
then what happens very commonly is someone will say, well, I'm doing so good, I don't need these meds.
Mm.
And
Wrong.
and they stop taking the meds and
Mm,
quickly decompensate, and you
yeah.
see the down spiral. So I like to think about the physical compared to the mental piece, right? So it's
Yeah.
no different from someone who's diabetic, right?
Yeah.
They're managing their diabetes good, and then they go to the cookout or they go to the celebration. Now they're eating cake, right? And now they're their levels are off.
Right.
So it happens like that with mental health, especially bipolar disorder as well. But it's very important that families continue to be that support. You wouldn't shut a person off who's dealing with a heart condition or dealing
Mm,
with someone who may have amputated legs, and
right.
you continue to support. If there's anything a message that I can nail home during our conversation, Autumn, is that the mental health and the substance use piece is real, and if we can start thinking about it as a community the same way that we think about individuals who are experiencing physical
Right.
challenges, then
Right.
it'll help us to be more compassionate and understanding.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
so those individuals who, are, experiencing those challenges, it can be extremely tough. And
Yeah.
for them to pull together one good day to them could be everything.
Hey.
So for us to be like, hey, wow, here we go. A week later, you're doing the same stuff again.
Mm,
We have to anticipate. We have to anticipate that and be thankful if they are able to string together any days at all.
right.
So, we want to make sure I always like to, lead with a positive perspective. So we want to always reinforce the positivities,
Yeah.
uh, what they're doing, and help them remember that
Right.
during the tough times, and that can help to bring them back. But yeah, it has to be that constant support. And when we have expectations of other people and what they should be doing based upon our experiences and our abilities,
Mm.
set ourselves up for failure every time.
Right. That's good. That's good. I think that's good, regardless whether you're dealing with people with mental illness or not. We have to stop
Yeah.
that projecting. Be like, well, this is what I'm feeling, or this is what I would
Mhm.
do. So you should be doing. Absolutely not. We need to
It's
be
selfish,
accepting.
right? When you think about it.
Right.
Hmm.
Right. Right. Well, it's a very limited, self-centered approach, and
Hmm.
I know we as humans do
Hmm.
that more than a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So which tends to break down a lot of things, but that's good. That's good. What's one thing, like, if talking about acceptance and support and encouraging and things like that, what's one thing that is kind of a belief or a myth that keeps us from being able to do that we need to like unlearn, if that makes sense? Like if we could just think about this in a different manner. And I know you kind of touched on a little bit, like thinking about it like a physical ailment, but is there something that, like, for instance, I tend to think that people feel like people who have addiction issues are just like weak individuals, or just, you know what I mean? Like, and
Hmm.
that's not necessarily true, right? So if you could just get rid of that thought, maybe you might be able to see this a little bit differently. So
Hmm.
is there something, you know what I mean? Like, if we could just think about this, this one thing different, it might be the beginning of really connecting to somebody who's struggling.
Right. So another great question. You have some awesome questions. So I think of two things, right?
Okay.
So the first thing is when you think that someone who's dealing with a challenge is always needy or needs help.
Mm. Okay.
And it's like, oh, poor little you, or that person. No, they may be dealing with some challenges,
Hmm.
but give them room, give them space to grow, give
Yeah.
them space to do what they need to do to manage and cope with their situations.
Right.
And then
Right.
the second piece is if we can get out of this mindset of they should be okay,
Mm.
right?
Okay.
Someone who's experienced trauma. Oh, that happened when you were a kid. Why
Ma-
why are you still talking about that? Right?
Come
Or
on.
you
Yes.
know, that happened to me and I'm fine,
Right. But are
right?
you though?
People or the famous line, right? Is people going through worse, right? Like that needs to go, right? Because everybody definition of a crisis from my perspective is a person dealing with a situation that exceeds their level of coping.
That's
So,
good.
so for someone who think about suicidal, right?
Hmm.
If someone loses their home, their job, and are homeless, they could be suicidal.
Absolutely.
Um, they a relationship. Someone has been involved with somebody their whole life. They don't know where they're gonna go next.
Right.
Where the next person may be totally fine. It's homeless people by choice. We know that.
Right.
You know that from working in public safety. It's people that
Right.
can housing and they choose to live on the streets.
Right.
So everybody's level of coping with situations are different, and we need
Right.
to respect that.
That's good. That's really good because you are so right. That's even one of the ways that people try to minimize what they are going through themselves. They're like, but I don't. At least I'm not
Hmm.
getting that, like, or at least I'm not experiencing that, at least as though their pain or their suffering or whatever they're going through is not valid or important or real or, worth talking about. That's good. That's really good. Not only from the outside but the inside. And I had to start doing that for myself too. Be like, stop comparing your, like, who's out here comparing pain?
But Autumn, it's work though,
Yeah.
right? So it's
Yeah.
just like, and another thing I try to help folks understand is it's just like going to the gym. If you go to the gym and eating healthy, so
Yeah.
you eat healthy, you go to the gym for a week or two, a month, you feel great. But take a week or two and a month off, and you're right back.
Yeah.
So this work we talked about when you talked about, the self-maintenance and all of those pieces,
Hmm.
it's things we have to do on a daily basis.
Yeah.
You have to continue to be mindful of yourself and keep yourself in check.
Right.
Because, you can be doing great, supportive to people, understanding, having it all balanced all out. But if you're not continuing to do that work to keep yourself sharp, you can fall off the wayside very quickly.
Right, right. And and that's good too. I always say, listen, you just one decision away from being
Yep.
in somebody else's shoes in a lot of situations. And so,
Yep.
certainly giving grace to other people, but recognizing, your own humanity and things like that. One of the, um, I, it talk going back for just a second to public safety, and I'm only using that as a reference point, but I know that it's representative of like so many other places. That there's a stigma, like people can't even recognize, like I'm going through something. Something's off. I don't feel good. I'm struggling. They trying to thug it out in silence because they're afraid of the stigma that's going to go along with it, and in some places, some ways, very real, right? Like if I'm diagnosed with something, that may shut the door for me to have opportunities here or there. Um, I know that you do a lot of advocacy work. Are you working in that space to try to change what that looks like or how those things can be, can affect people in their real everyday life?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's definitely something that I'm doing. Whether it's working with law enforcement, public
Mm,
safety, or our public service workers, always trying to, because they're expected to be perfect
right,
all the
right,
time. Our
right.
police officers, our teachers. I had a teacher tell me one time, she said, I'm a celebrity without celebrity pay.
That
Meaning
part.
that, if they make one mistake, it's going to be blasted in the newspaper.
Yeah,
But they
yeah.
can do everything right forever,
Do
and no
one
one,
thing wrong.
no one will pay attention to it.
Uh-huh.
So, and we all know they're human.
Yeah,
You got good teachers, you got bad teachers, you got
right,
good police officers, you got bad, you got
right,
good and bad everything. Whether you're talking
right.
about your car mechanic, your politician, or what have you. And what we have to do is stop grouping people and start to treat people more as individuals.
Yeah,
Understand that they are just that, human beings who make mistakes. All of us make mistakes. None of us are exempt from that. And it has to be that understanding. And it can't just be hypocritical to where, oh, I made a mistake, get over it, or
yeah,
my family member made a mistake, right? No big deal. But let somebody else do it. that same thing, and it's the end
Right?
of the world, right?
Armageddon. We going.
So it has to be that, and I always say I lead with the compassion and the love piece. When you think of, you said something very strong early, a few minutes ago, and it's something that I used to say to staff, when I was in operations overseeing facilities. And I would say, hey, all of us are just one phone call away from being in crisis ourselves, depending on
Mm,
what phone call
right.
it.
Right.
So if you can always keep that humanity with you
Yeah.
and that humbleness with individuals, and if we can
Yeah.
get that to be the mindset shift. You talked about mind shifts, right? That's the thing. So the the mind shift of the community of our nation, of being a place where it's okay to make mistakes,
Right.
um, and people are still going to be there to support you and be understanding. So
Yeah.
we have to do that not just with people who we quote unquote expect to do it, but for those people who are expected to not make mistakes too.
Right. That's good. That's really good. I actually did a teaching on forgiveness, and one of the components of like how you forgive is that you have to be able to identify with someone else's humanity, and the only way that you can do that is by identifying with your own first,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
recognizing that the same way you are susceptible to anything that a human is susceptible to, then you can start to understand that so is the person that's sitting across from you. But we
Hmm.
think stuff like, I could never, I would never, I just that. I say, you know what? You can do anything that a human can do.
Hmm.
Just get the right circumstances, right time, right mindset,
Hmm.
right, all of the pieces. Anything that a human can do, it's in all of us. And so
Yep.
having some humility about that, you ain't perfect, then yeah, we can start to look at other people and take into consideration all of the pieces that got them there and be like, it's not necessarily that it's a character flaw, it's humanity. They are human and they had a very human experience. Sometimes it comes with consequences, but not stigmatizing people. And I think that that's the thing.
Hmm.
I think to that point, a lot of people, again, are struggling and battling with things silently that they can't, or I shouldn't say they can't, they don't feel comfortable coming forward with because of how people are going to judge them. And so then we do see like these crazy toxic things come out later because now it's just overflowed. Like they couldn't
Hmm.
contain it anymore. But if we had just made room and space for them to be able to come forward sooner, we might have avoided
Yep.
some of these other things on the back end, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So unfortunately, that's more rare than
Yeah.
it
And
should be.
it's about, right, trying to get rid of the stigma and decrease it and get rid of it as much as we can.
Yeah.
With the understanding that folks are going through things.
Yeah.
And everybody needs this help, and this help isn't just for a specific group or a type of person who we think needs it, but again, going back to the physical health and the mental health piece, it's
Yeah.
everyone needs.
Right.
And if you're talking about first responders, showing up to, this for yourself, showing up to car accidents, seeing some of the most
Horrific.
horrific things you've ever
Yeah.
seen, right? And being able to, and then have to go to work and get up and do it again tomorrow, like nothing happened. You know, packing that in day to day and continuing to move forward. Of course, you're gonna have
Right.
um, some challenges, and because you decide to go and seek out help, does not mean you're weak.
Right. Right.
Does not mean that you shouldn't get that promotion or that opportunity because you had to go see a therapist,
Right.
or because you realized you had an addiction and you needed to go get some services for your addiction. That does not mean you're weak. That we as a community need to have that mind shift of welcoming that and actually pushing that forward and inviting that forward for people to do, and highlighting it as a strength. And I think that's where we really need to
That's good.
get. And once we get there, we'll be a greater community. When we
Absolutely. Healthier.
Mhm.
Listen, everybody has experienced some level and form of trauma. We all have. So minimizing that and acting like it's not that bad, it just sets you up for failure. It comes up some kind of way. I it makes me feel like, so one of the things we talk like in healthcare is this idea that uh it's almost like the, what is it, the law of physics, yeah, or energy, right? That energy is never neither created nor destroyed. It's just like it's got to go somewhere. And it's the same kind of thing that when you're experiencing something, it doesn't just disappear, it goes somewhere. Like it has to get out somewhere. So whether it's high blood pressure, a stroke, anger, addiction, whatever, like it's going to relieve itself in some way, shape, or form. So it's whether you choose how it gets relieved or whether it chooses how it gets relieved, it's
Mhm.
going to get relieved.
Yep. Yep. Exactly. Exactly. And that's why, having that self-awareness is so important, to channel that energy.
Yeah.
I work with individuals who I'm working with in therapy, and one of the things I tell them is, you know, the exercising, right? That we all know how
Yeah.
important it is to be able to just blow some steam
Yeah.
and get it out, like, very important. But, some people do arts and crafts, some people go fishing, some people, you find that thing that
Yeah.
helps you channel that energy because, like you said, it's in there.
It's in
Uh,
there.
and it's gonna come out one way or another, right? And
Right.
that's where you have people with these, different types of behaviors,
Yeah.
and you know, unknown to them, this is how they're relieving it. They're
Right.
relieving it at happy hour. They're relieving it at the casinos,
Right.
rolling, with the slots. You
They
you
don't see
gonna
the
you're gonna
connection.
get it out. It's
Yeah.
gonna come out.
They don't see the connection. And that's the
Mhm.
part. They don't see the connection. So what are you working on right now?
Yeah. So currently, I'm doing my 9 to 5 gig, which is
Hmm.
working in Maryland, helping to support. We've created the crisis system of care, but at this point, we're continuing to monitor it, advocate for it, help to increase the utilization and awareness of it. Meaning, the rather it's the crisis facilities or the
Yeah.
outpatient services, all of that. So that's my daytime work. I also have a few kids that I work with in the community that's at risk, that I
Nice.
do therapy with,
Okay.
through an agency, and then I'm also working with different organizations in the community, to increase behavioral health, mental health, and substance use services here in Delaware.
Okay.
Um, really have a strong connection and really have a lot of respect for Project Seed.
I
Uh,
love Project Seed.
Gerald Tatum, he's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of our other close friends, Dan Moss, um,
Hmm.
somebody who I work with in a community, and we're just guys who are just really passionate about helping people.
Yeah.
Um, I tell people I'm very blessed and thankful that I'm at a space in my life where, and I wish I was able to be insightful enough to know this when I was younger, but
Okay.
get to a place where it's not about me. It's not about if I do something, what's in it for me,
Yeah.
but more so just really wholeheartedly, how can I help others? How
Yeah.
can I help you accomplish your dreams and goals?
Right.
How can I help to make your life better? And when you really operate from that space, Autumn,
Mm.
the Most High opens the universe for you.
A hundred
So,
percent.
yeah, so I'm
Because
just really,
that's his plan.
yeah, yeah,
As long
yeah.
as you in alignment with his plan, he gonna make it work.
Yep, yep. So I'm just
Y-
really excited for opportunities and what's going to happen in the future,
Yeah.
because I feel like I'm connected to the right people. You reached out to me. I said for sure, right?
A hundred
And
percent.
anything that can be done that even if one thing is said that someone can connect with that will
Right.
help see that behavioral health, mental health is really important,
Yeah.
whether it's for them personally or if it's someone in their family, or that
Yeah.
they are connected to that they can give some information to. So that's what I'm doing.
Yeah. Okay.
My
Okay.
job is my hobby. Thank-
You lucky. That's good. That's good. That's
yeah,
lucky.
yeah.
Real quick before you move on to that, I do
Uh,
want to ask you one thing with that because you talked about the crisis care and uh, where's a gap that exists? That I know there's a lot of gaps. Let me just say that. I know you like, man, what? I could talk about this all day. Um, okay, let me narrow it down. Where's a gap that exists that that you would think, man, if we could just get this thing locked in, it would make a huge difference. If it would be like you could tomorrow, you could wave your magic wand, do the fairy dust, and be like, boom, this thing would be in place with crisis management. What what would be that one thing if you had to choose? I know that's a hard one.
nah, yeah, it's I could, you're right. I could probably go on and on about it, but the truth of it is we're really not too far away from it.
Okay.
We made a lot of progress these last few years.
Okay.
You know, um, you know, a lot of funding has been cut recently,
Yeah.
which we all know of. But
Uh-huh.
working really closely with Samson the last few years, Dr. Walina Shaw, and other folks over there at
Okay.
Samson, um, really made a lot of change and a lot of impact in our country with creating services and rolling out things. But my wish would be for the insurances and
Mm,
the reimbursement rates to be adequate for individuals who are providing mental health and substance use services, to not have to always be trying to squeeze they say
right.
squeeze a quarter and make the eagle holler, right? Trying
Right.
to figure
Right.
out how to provide quality care,
Right.
right? And be able to pay people respectively
Yeah.
and maintain their programs.
Right.
So, with being able to have um whether it's insurance rates, codes, those things, up to par, to be able to support programs so that they can have sustainability, to where after every grant they're not trying to look for more funding, or
Right.
they're
Right.
trying to be creative with their programs to be able to make it manageable, to be able to be profitable to a point to where they can continue to operate.
Right.
So that would be my magic wand. If I could get the rates and the support needed from a financial standpoint, where folks could operate in that space without having to worry about
To
that
be
piece.
concerned about that. Yeah,
Mhm.
one extra stressor that could be relieved. I'm glad you said that. That's actually really good because I think that that is um that's really important. You think about the discrepancy between people who may be having one level of insurance or and what the care that they can receive versus somebody who's independently financially able to afford different things and the care that they may be able to receive. And it's not because the providers are worse or less or anything in that, but it's just to your point, the funding and what they can and cannot do. And that's really, that's unfortunate. That really is unfortunate.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that. I could see
Mhm.
that. We could talk about, I was getting ready to go somewhere with that. I'm like, I'm not going to do it. I'm like, what do you feel like the resistance is? I know exactly what the resistance is. People, money is money and people are doing the things, but there's that.
Yeah.
Anywho, so yeah,
But
okay.
real quick though, I'm a jump in,
Okay.
but what I've seen in doing this work across the country is, when you do it and you do it right,
Uh-huh.
you save money anyway.
See, come on.
Cause at the end of the day, you know, and I think what it is the people that's making the decisions aren't versed,
Or don't understand that.
right?
Yeah.
So I'm not I'm not gonna pay an electrician to come in here and do my plumbing. I'm gonna get a
Right.
plumber. So electrician might know a little bit about plumbing, but they don't know plumbing like a plumber.
Right.
So the people making the decisions need to be versed.
Right.
And if they
Right.
were, they would know, just like with, medical care, we're figuring out that, when you do things from a prevention standpoint, you end up saving money on the back end.
Much cheaper. Much
Um,
cheaper.
Same thing with mental health and behavioral health
Yeah.
and substance issues. Once you be proactive, you save money.
Yeah, that's facts. People are so rah rah and adamant about, oh, I don't, healthcare. No, 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 no. I'm like, man, an ounce of prevention, right? Like you don't know how costly and expensive it is to have to care for somebody once they've had a stroke and now cannot,
Yeah.
their daily quality of life is that they cannot care for themselves. Now they need around the clock help and
Hmm.
assistance. If you had done a little bit of just helping them with their blood pressure beforehand, we would not be figuring out around the clock care for them on the back end. Like it's mind boggling. It's mind boggling. We trying to save two pennies and end up spending, $9 million. But there's that.
Exactly. Exactly. Exactly.
There
Yeah.
is that. Um, Last question before my last question.
Okay.
So I
Yep.
got two questions. Last question before my last question. All right,
Okay.
you ready? All
Hmm.
right. Let's say I'm in crisis, okay? And I need help. What are some of the things that are available to me? And what are my rights, so to speak, in that space? If I'm in crisis and I go and get help, am I turning over all my rights to be able to say yes or no? What does that look like?
Yep. So no,
Okay.
if you go to get help, you're still protected.
Okay.
You still have your rights to as far as consenting to treatment,
Okay.
to especially if you're voluntary, because there's two different
Uh-huh.
ways of looking at it. Someone who's committed and can be under a detained or an involuntary status, that's when they've been deemed to be a threat to themselves or others,
Okay.
um, and that's at risk. At that point, individuals will step in to kind of help make the best decisions for them to make sure that they don't hurt themselves or they don't hurt anyone
Right.
else.
Right.
Now, if you are in crisis and you need help, and you go into somewhere, or rather right now, 988, right, is something huge. You talked about that earlier.
Uh-huh.
It's the national push for supporting individuals who may be experiencing a crisis.
Yeah.
Uh, you can call that number. Most areas, I know Delaware does, Maryland does, have mobile response teams. Um,
Mm.
and you have, your crisis stabilization facilities, and you have outpatient services. So that's what I do.
Okay.
When I talk about creating a crisis system, that's what a crisis system is. So if you
Yeah.
think of it as pillars, you would think of the first thing would be, we use the phrase of someone to call, someone to come to you, somewhere to go.
Okay.
So, if in crisis you have someone to call, which is 988.
Okay.
They're going to try their best to provide you support over the phone, de-escalate anything that may be happening, provide resources to you. If they're unable to stabilize you over the phone, and they deem it to be a serious enough situation
Mm-hmm.
where someone needs to be dispatched out to you, then a mobile response team, which is typically a master's level clinician in behavioral health and a
Okay.
peer, will come to you. So whether you're at home, whether you're at
Right.
Starbucks,
Wherever you are.
your mobile response team will come to
Okay.
you.
That's
Um,
important.
and they will try to do their best. They'll do assessments. They'll provide support to you, put together a plan for you, and try to keep you safe, and make sure you're good moving
Yeah.
forward.
Right.
If they're unable to do that, then they would either transport you, or you would go there yourself, which would be a
Uh-huh.
crisis stabilization facility.
Okay.
And in there, you will potentially be able to work with a professional, to, peers, master level clinicians,
Mm-hmm.
nurses, psychiatrists, to be able to really provide you with a lot of resources and support to help stabilize you in that setting.
Yeah.
And then if you exceed that level, the inpatient settings, where you have your inpatient hospitals, that can provide you that inpatient hospital care. But during that whole process, if you're voluntary, you have the opportunity to say, I'm good. I don't need
Um,
this. If you're not a threat to yourself or anybody
right,
else.
right,
So you're not relinquishing your rights in any way,
yeah,
shape, or form. You maintain it, and you maintain HIPAA, meaning that that information that you're sharing won't get shared with anybody else.
right.
So really important to make sure that individuals know how to access services and what to do. And then, of course, there's several outpatient providers providing therapy, different types of support groups that you can go to get help. And of course, from a substance use standpoint, there's substance use services throughout Delaware that people can connect with from an outpatient setting and inpatient setting as well.
That's good. That's good. It's important people know that because, there, it's just lack of knowledge. And people are like, I don't know where to go or who to call or what to do or what's going to happen when I get there. And it can be scary. So, really, really good. And I know that rights, people feeling like my rights are going to be taken from me is a huge feeling of being out of control. And that's really important. Um, this may or may not exist, and I don't know, but I'm gonna ask just in case because maybe somebody might need to know. If they don't have insurance, is there any place that they can go or call to get therapy?
Yeah, so that whole crisis continuum
Uh-huh.
that I just spoke about,
Uh-huh.
crisis system of care, you don't need insurance for.
Okay.
Uh,
Perfect.
so you can call 988. Uh, they can connect you. You can go to the crisis stabilization facilities.
Uh-huh.
If you're in need of mobile crisis services, mobile crisis that come out to you in Delaware does a great job um, with making sure crisis services are available to people.
Yeah.
So and then in that process, what typically what happen is you can also get professionals that can help you get signed up for Medicaid or Medicare or whatever insurance you
Uh,
may need and help
right, right,
you
right.
to put together a long-term plan.
That's good. That's good. All right. This has been really insightful. I appreciate you so much. This has really helped, and I know that it's going to be a blessing to someone that is dealing with this either themselves or someone that they know or love. And it's good to get perspective. And I think it's really good to get reassurance and to know and to understand that you are not alone. You are not the only one that's experiencing something, that we can remove the shame and the just the cloak and dagger of it all. It's like let's let it breathe. Like we need to get this. Let's get this out here. So my last and final question, and I ask everybody here, that everybody who's on the podcast, this question: what is one piece of life changing advice that you have been given?
Mm. Oh, you really got some great questions over there. Um,
Look, this is my therapy. This is my way to get wisdom. I ask everybody on here, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna grow from what you tell me. So yeah,
right, right.
yeah.
So I always tell people the one thing that I always go to is um, as you change your thinking,
Uh-huh.
you change your life.
Facts, facts,
Yeah,
facts,
yeah.
facts. Absolutely, absolutely. Trying to, okay. I know we ending this conversation, but I just gotta say this one thing because I know you gonna get it. You understand this, Carlos. It's really hard for people to understand that behavior and thoughts are connected.
Mhm.
We spend a lot of time trying to get people to change their behavior and spend little to no time trying to get people to change how they think. And you're like, this is why it doesn't stick. You
Mhm.
might get me for 5 minutes to put the red ball in the yellow cup, but that's only going to last for so long until you change the way that I think about the cup, the way that I
Mhm.
think about that. But like, then the behavior is natural. Like it's an overflow. Behavior is an overflow of
Mhm.
thoughts.
Yep.
It's not a hard concept, but for some reason, it's like, what? No, let's just put a whole bunch of money and time and effort and energy to shape up, act right, do this thing. If you
Yeah.
invested more in mind shifts, an ounce of prevention.
Yeah. Yeah,
An element of
it's
prevention.
work. It's work, right?
It is
And
work.
we talk about that. That's been consistent throughout our conversation. And
Yeah.
a big part of perception is huge. And
Yeah.
having a sense of control of your thought patterns is very important. There's always that half cup, half full analogy, right?
Mm.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Indeed. Indeed. Well, thank you again. I appreciate you so much. Listen, y'all, I know that you were absolutely blessed by this conversation. I know I was. I hope that this is something that is able to give you some peace and insight and an opportunity to reflect on yourself or maybe some people that are in your life, and just to mind shift from there. So have an amazing week. Be blessed. We'll see you next time. Carlos, thank you.
here, thank you also. Take care.
Okay. Bye bye.
Bye.